Your ministers for good, and you installed them. Lord, we thank you for the beautiful place that we have to live. We thank you for all the big city problems that we largely miss out on, and we're not sorry to miss out on them. Lord, I pray for these men and women and for the many, many others that serve our city and make things run and keep things operating smoothly, that you will bless and protect each one, and that you will give each one wisdom in doing their jobs. I pray for our city council in particular. I pray that you would give them wisdom in doing everything that's within their authority to limit the scourge of drug addiction in our community. I pray that you would give them wisdom in doing everything within their authority. And I realize that they're not directly over the schools, but that they would have wisdom in limiting the false indoctrination in our public schools, particularly on the issue of the transgender madness. And Lord, again, I thank you for them, and I ask that you would bless each one. I pray that they would have wisdom from you, and I pray that the community would be blessed, as your word says, to live quiet and peaceable lives in all dignity and godliness. Lord, I thank you for our law enforcement, and I pray that you would bless them and protect them. I pray that you would enable them to catch the drunk drivers before they hurt anyone. I pray that you enable them to catch the crooks before they victimize anyone further. I pray, Lord, that in any situation where a bad guy is shooting at one of our officers, that the bad guy would be the one taken out. Lord, we thank you that you are the ultimate authority, that you are the sovereign over all, and we trust you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any comments from citizens on agenda items? Do we have any comments from citizens on non-agenda items?
Mayor Ortega, we have a comment for a non-agenda item from Ken Burke.
Please.
I have a real tough and complicated issue for you. You're going to have trouble handling it. Our church is right over here on 7th Avenue and 1107 South 7th Avenue. And it used to have at the curb right beside the main entrance 2 handicap parking signs. And one of them got broken off. And we'd appreciate it if it could be replaced. At our church, a church I attended years ago in California, they actually had Sundays only handicap signs. And I don't know if that's within your purview, but that seems like a great idea to us. And if you were going to do that, put 2 more out there. We don't need to inconvenience the neighbors Monday through Friday or the people picking up their kids from Safford Middle School. But it'd be great if our limited mobility folks could have that stretch of curb on Sunday morning.
Thank you. Okay, then we'll move on to item number 7, new business. Has everybody had a chance to review the January 27th council meetings? Any questions or changes?
Mayor, I move that we approve the minutes for January 27th, 2025.
I second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of January 27th, 2025. All in favor? Opposed? Carries. Item number 8, resolution number R25-004, naming of 2 new City of Safford parks.
Mayor Ortega, I'd just like to take a moment real quick to recognize the presence of Graham County Board of Supervisor Paul David.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a request for the Mayor and City Council to use the public input compiled by the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee to name 2 new city parks by passing R25-004. Strategic goals are quality of life, public information and outreach. Background, the mayor and city council passed a naming policy in November of 2023, which the Parks and Recreation Committee used to solicit public input for names of the 2 new parks on El Paso Boulevard and Discovery Park Boulevard. I would also like to thank the Parks and Recreation Committee for the hard work and hours of thought that they put into their recommendation. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee reviewed the information provided at a public open house through electronic survey data and information provided at their regular meeting by residents. A work session was held to present the information gathered by the committee and receive input from the City Council on January 27th, 2025. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee has diligently collected data and public input for the City Council to consider when they make a decision. Recommendation, the Parks and Recreation Committee recommends that the Mayor and City Council adopt Resolution R25-004, naming the park on 8th and Discovery Mayor Jason Couts Park and the park on El Paso Boulevard Owens Family Park. With that, I will stand for questions.
Anybody have any questions?
Just a comment again, Mayor, to say thanks for the Parks and Rec Committee and you, Jamie, as well. City manager, everybody that was involved in this process. Took a lot of work, a lot of time, and we appreciate that.
Anybody else?
Mayor, I appreciate the parks people's input too. They did put a lot into it and were guided sometimes. And they've been at it for a couple of years. But I myself would like to wait to name these parks when we have something to name out there. We haven't hardly moved any dirt on one of them. And I'd like something there more recognizable that we can name.
Any other comment?
So if that's needs amending or anything, if somebody was going to make a motion, I don't know. I'd have to listen to the clerk. But and I was told if we tabled it, it doesn't have to come back at any set time. We can assign a time if we would like to, or other than that, we can just wait till it progresses and we actually have something there physically to see, and then we can name it.
Just a response to that, Mayor, if anybody in the process, including the families of the people that the parks are being named after, if that would be something they'd prefer, that'd be fine. Otherwise, I don't see why we wouldn't resolve the naming now. I don't think much will change between now and then. That's just my thought.
You know what, excuse me, and I'll add to that naming them now, I don't have any problem with it. I think to me, I think it's a good thing to do. So when we do talk about the parks from here until they're developed, we will be calling them by name. And that way, our public citizens, they'll get familiar with what we're talking about. So I think they should be named now, just as we've been
Mayor,
moving forward.
I just want to comment on that. We've been kind of waiting on this 8th and Discovery Park. That's what it's been being called. We want to name it on the plans so it can be on the record as this is the design for this Jason Couts Park or whatever it's going to be called. We want to have that on the plans. We've been kind of waiting to get that on the plan, so it'll be part of the design process and we'll be able to present it as such.
Jamie, for public record, can you please state the results of what the results came back in for the names? Because there's nothing showing in our minutes. And I've had several people ask me when the votes were taken and what votes went for what. Could you please tell us what those results came in?
Sure, I can tell you that 97 votes were for Mayor Jason Couts, and that the next name that had the next amount of votes was for the Owens family, which had 7. And then there were several other names that had maybe 1 vote or just the person that nominated them.
So do you know how many, I mean, we have 10,000 people in the valley. How many people actually voted on this?
So I don't have those numbers with me right now, but I do know that it was posted on our website for 2 months. We had it at the library and the annex for over a month, and we had an in-person meeting. We had also, we had it at events like Salsa Fest and Oktoberfest, paper ballots for the public.
I just had a lot of comments come back in that they didn't even know about this vote. And so, I mean, it doesn't seem like if we have 10,000 people, only 97 people voting, that doesn't seem like the majority. So I'm kind of with Arnold that maybe we need to open that back up. I'm not saying I don't like them, but I have had several people say, I didn't know about it, I didn't hear about it. I don't think that we really got it out there because a lot of these are like people that are out in the community. So maybe if we could get some more people voting, I don't think having 1% of the population vote is really a good number. Maybe we can open that back up and get some more people voting.
I wasn't necessarily saying we open it back up.
No, I know. Yours was just not naming right now.
Yeah,
I just
mine
don't
was-
feel,
And I like what Councilman Hempfield and the mayor said about that too, and I'd take that into consideration, but I don't know, that's the way I feel. We just don't have no dirt moved. That's just the way I felt about it. Not that I'm against what the committee put in. I enjoyed their effort and I liked their recommendations.
Well, I'll just say again, I think it's very important that they're named now. So as was mentioned, referring to the work being done on it. We have a name for the park. They'll know what we're talking about, where we're talking about, and to me, I think they'll get familiar with it. And that to me is very important.
And Mayor, just to add real quickly too, and this isn't to be sarcastic or anything. I agree in a lot of ways with what Councilwoman Brantner is saying, but we've had elected members of the council with about 700 or 800 total votes. Not a much higher percentage, 8% of the 10,000 instead of 1%. So getting people to vote is not easy. And I think they've probably had plenty of opportunity.
Thank you for bringing that up. I agree with you totally.
Well, Mayor, when the time comes, I would be supporting what the committee put forward. I would be supporting that in the future. So I guess I kind of support it now.
Anybody else have any comments? If not, it's an action item.
Mayor, I move that we approve Resolution R25-004, the naming of the two City of Safford parks to be Jason Couch Park and Owens Family Park. Is that the correct actual name?
Yes, sir.
I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to go ahead and name the parks as presented. All in favor? Opposed? It carries. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to resolution.
I need to read it off.
You have to read it. I'm sorry.
This approves resolution number R25-004, a resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of Safford, Graham County, Arizona, authorizing the naming of the two new city parks. And the vote was 6-1 with Councilwoman Brantner opposing.
Thank you. Then we'll move on to item number 2, resolution R25-006, the cemetery policies and regulations amendments.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a request for Mayor and Council to review and approve a minor amendment to the policies and regulations of the Safford Municipal Cemetery to clearly include and define underground burials. Staff is recommending approval. Just a little background, the current policies and regulations for the cemetery were adopted as is in December of 2022. This clarification within the policy was needed to define that all burials, whether casket or cremation, must be placed below ground. There's been some minor misinterpretation of the word burial. It was assumed that that meant underground, but people misinterpret that different ways. So on page 68 of your packet, or page 4 of 7 of the policies, there's one line that says no above ground entombments of any kind are allowed. So that's the minor clarification that staff has recommended be amended in the policies.
Any comment or question?
So you're ruling out any mausoleums at all?
Mausoleums have always been outlawed. They've always been part of our policy, is not allowed. What's come about now is, and we've got the support of the mortuaries as well, that I guess they sell like little concrete benches and whatnot that have a safe vault built into them. And what we're getting from the mortuaries themselves through their experience, not here, but other places, is those get broke into and people put valuables in them and they get stolen. So they're supporting us doing this. They're the ones that kind of brought it to us and said, hey, let's clarify this. We don't want that stuff above ground. If people do it, at least it's against policy, and we're kind of covered there. But that's the reason for it is this above ground stuff isn't safe.
Yeah, I just had a question on the policy. It has a lot of great information. I was just curious if that was available to the
On the
like
website.
online or on it is on the
Yeah,
website. Okay.
Yeah, it's on the Public Works website under cemetery. And
Okay.
it's listed there. You can click on it.
Perfect.
We do have it. We have quite a few questions asked when people come in. We don't hand them 7 pages of policies, but we answer a lot of questions, and we always tell them they can ask us any. Most of it's about the curbing, and we have a permit to do the curbing. Give them a permit at that time, but always tell them if they have questions, they can call us or get
Okay.
online.
Perfect.
Mhm.
And while you up there, been hearing a lot of good comments about the cemetery. The added garbage bins that have been set out around through there have helped people who can't necessarily take things all the way to the big bin, those things. And we had a ceremony out there a few days ago, and it looked really nice.
Thank you. We try and keep up on those. I know there's a lot of cans out there, and sometimes when the wind blows, it gets pretty bad. But I know, there's a fine line of having too many cans and not enough. So I get your point there, and we try and get enough to make it to where people can get their stuff to the cans. So.
Thank you, sir.
Mhm.
Anybody else? If not, then we'll move on to,
I
Mayor, I move that we approve Resolution R25-006.
I second.
okay, we have a motion and a second to approve Resolution R25-006. All in favor? Opposed? Carries.
This approves resolution number R25-006, a resolution of the mayor and city council of the city of Safford, Graham County, Arizona, amending the policies and regulations for the Safford Municipal Cemetery.
Thank you. Okay, the number 9. Number 1 is Baker Tilly Advisory Group, LP contract.
Mayor, council, good evening. I bring forward a contract extension or agreement for your consideration tonight. It's a request for mayor and council to authorize and enter into a contract with Baker Tilly Group LP from our previous auditors. The background behind this is you'll notice that during the 2023 fiscal year-end audit, there was a few findings. One of the findings that we're trying to address with Baker Tilly's is the lack of a capital asset inventory. There's 2 different types of inventory you do as an accountant. There's our warehouse where we store repair parts. That's an inventory of repair parts, but not the same as this inventory. This inventory is for all of our capital assets. These are vehicles, these are buildings, these are underground infrastructure. So through our knowledge and my records, we were unable to find any previous inventory done by the city. So this step with Baker Tilly was to actually go out and do an inventory that we could actually record what we have on the books and what's actually physically on the ground. So Baker Tilly has done that for part of the way. We initially started with a $60,000 contract, keeping it under the procurement level that the council didn't need approval, but we didn't get as far as we'd like to. As you can see in my analysis, we had a lot of goals as we started this project with them, that we were going to reconcile water, gas, wastewater, electric, streets, infrastructure. We were going to perform an inventory of movable assets. We're going to develop comprehensive frameworks for land improvements and buildings. And we wanted to prepare the annual financial footnotes. What we were able to actually accomplish for the $56,208 that we were done with Baker Tilly was we just got to water and wastewater. conditions on the ground were a little bit more complicated. We have records that go back to 1920, but trying to compare those records to what's on the financials turned into a tedious task. So a lot of our time was spent on just reconciling water and wastewater. And you'll notice as part of the annual audit this year, we'll present a write-off related to those infrastructure. They're one of the largest in the city. We did perform a movable asset, so we were able to focus on the things like vehicles and equipment that move around. And we did place tags on those for the very first time. So we actually have a record of a tag on it says City of Safford, and that ties to an actual record in the financial systems. And there was a write-off associated with that. And then preparing the capital asset footnote this year, given all the changes that we were doing and the cleanup, there was a lot of work that Baker Tilly did so that we could prepare ourselves for the Heinfield Meach actual in 2024 audit. So we used $56,208 and we ran out of contract space. So now what I'm coming to you is asking for an additional $60,000 in one more year to see if we can get electric, gas, streets, and buildings and land improvements better classified in our system and get a more accurate record. We try to do as much as we can internally to keep this down to a minimum, but there's just a lot of stuff that they bring the expertise to the table, and they add a lot of assistance to my group by doing this for us. So with that, I turn the time back over to you for your consideration and vote.
Any comments?
I have a question. So it looks like in your terms, you're saying this contract's from the time we sign it through December 31, 2025, and the amount is $60,000. Does Baker Tilly believe that they can accomplish all of those tasks? Because they've now seen what they're in for. We've already had them for a period of time, and they've accomplished some of those things. I just want to make sure that is this reasonable, what we're asking them to do with that time frame and that dollar amount?
Good question. Thank you, Mayor, Councilmember Flores. So do they believe they can finish this within that time period? No. There's a lot out there. We just wanted to take another bite at it and try to keep the costs down as minimal as possible. We'll get as much done as we can for $60,000. I don't know how much I'll spend this fiscal year and how much will carry over into next fiscal year. But yeah, you get out there in the field and facts and figures and all of it just come together, and it's just a large process that has to get done on a tedious asset by asset basis. Really, what's stalling a lot of this is we don't have electric and gas in on our geographic information system, GIS, and that's what we're using as a source of truth. So I can't even get to electric and gas until we get confidence in what we have on the books already from the utility side. So once we're confident that we have a record of what is truth, I can compare the financials to that. So we believe $60,000 will take a larger chunk out of this, but what will be done, I can't guarantee that. The firm is also pessimistic that this can get done for $60,000. I just want to hold them to some sort of contract amount rather than giving open-ended contracts that say, just keep doing it. I want to encourage them to get done, right? So don't just keep on adding to the contract. But they're not optimistic. I'm not optimistic. We've lost a lot of time this year. We got through the audit for 2024, but getting this next step done takes time and effort. So
they have 10 months left, and you're offering them 60,000, but in return for what? Like, is there something concrete that you're saying by December 31st, I want X, Y, and Z for sure?
it's
Not
going.
just we might get to, but what are they actually giving you for the 60,000?
Mayor, Councilmember Bratner, we're going back to that original analysis, those original 4 points that I need all of this stuff done for the audit. We need to have a full reconciliation of all of our utilities, including streets. We need to have all of our movable assets continue to be tracked and guided, and development of a comprehensive framework for land and buildings. And again, continued help through the audit process. But yeah, it's those first 3 points that really, those were what you need to get done so we can officially say what we show on our financial statements are $150 million worth of assets we really have and we can put our hands on.
So you said you couldn't do one without the utilities. Is that something that maybe we need to hold off on the contract until you get your part done so that then they can do their part? Because then that's pushing us closer to December.
Mayor, Councilmember Bratner. So we have a deadline for gas and electric to be on our GIS system completely by June 30th. So they are working towards that. To be honest with you, they have that developed. Streets is still the one that's left out in the open. We don't have a set timeline. We're still trying to work with Esri on that one. But we do have gas and electric at least moving to the next stage so that we can do a financial inventory of those. As far as the buildings and land improvements, they're already on the books. That could be something that we're working on right now. And so, yeah, there's stuff for us to do in the meantime. And again, they're not just here wasting time waiting for the next thing to come. I only give them work based on what we have prepared for them. So once we have something prepared, I engage them and then we go from there.
Are they paying piecemeal? So as they do one thing, you pay them for that and then something else, or is it just the full 60,000?
Mayor, Councilmember Bratner, it's at hourly rate based on what task I give them. Say, if gas is ready and prepared, then we go with gas and we reconcile gas. If electric's rush, I give them that and then we reconcile that. They tell me how many hours that's gonna take. So, and they give us time recordings of how much time they spent by staff and by which staff members, because different staff members get paid different amounts.
Anybody else?
Does our inventory of property and buildings include easements and right-of-ways?
It does, Councilmember Bratner, or sorry, Mayor, Councilmember McGoy, it does. We're trying to reconcile with the county records of what it says we own. And so that's turned out to be another tedious task that they are still working with. But we've handled a lot of that internally because we understand the Graham County records a little bit better than Baker Tilly does. So we're trying to handle the land and or real estate related items internally rather than going through Baker Tilly.
Thank you.
So it kind of looked like you didn't think the 60,000 would be enough, so you have also 10% contingency written into it?
It's hard when we get down towards that set dollar amount to kind of get them to come in right at $60,000. Again, it's based off of timesheets and what they say they worked on. So I don't want to get in a situation where technically I owe them $61,000 and that's not in the contract. At some point in time, I need certain tasks just done, and fighting about where they ended and how much time they spent on it is not productive in getting that task done. Sorry, Mayor, that's Mayor.
And what was left on the other 60,000 will carry over with you? Because there's like 4,000 left. You used 56 out of the 60, the way it's written here.
Great question, Mayor, Vice Mayor Lopez. Yes, any remaining amount on the PO we will utilize towards the new contract. So technically 64,000 some odd dollars and 10%.
And 10% contingency.
I'll try to stay within
So
that.
hopefully you'll get it done.
Anybody else?
Mayor, I move that we approve the Baker Tilly Advisory Group contract.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the Baker Tilly Advisory Group LP contract. All in favor? Opposed? Carries. Okay. Item 10, we'll close the regular meeting and reconvene into a work session. A work session,
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, bring a request for our Mayor and City Council to review in this work session a proposed new and updated Safford Water System Administration guidelines and policies. Within those updated policies, there's a water facilities extension, basic agreement, a service agreement, and a future incorporation of some additional documents that we'll talk about for our future. We split this up because there's a lot of information in it. So, and we put it in the work session so that we can get everybody's input and conversation around it. City of Safford has historically managed our municipal water system through city code and ordinances. This process is only enforceable to our customers that live within the city limits. As the city provides services to customers outside of the city limits, the city needs to adopt policies and regulations that create a contractual relationship with all of our clusters, including those in other jurisdictions. So tonight, our representative, Steve Ween from Moyes, Sellers, and Hendricks has been representing the city of Safford. Yeah, Steve, if you want to be up here. The city of Safford for over 2 decades, and he's here. He's supported and helped provide the framework for these policies and these updates. And So we'd like to just go through those with everybody tonight. We put a PowerPoint presentation together to go ahead and discuss and kind of highlight some of the changes. The framework that was provided by Mr. Ween was brought to the city of Safford. We put together a management team and reviewed these policies and regulations so that they reflected a lot of the city code that we have existing, and then allowed us to move into this new process as a water authority over multiple jurisdictions. So tonight, through that process, I'll take care of the simple questions and we'll leave all the hard ones for Steve. But again, we're in a work session, so if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to interrupt and we'll move forward through this. So like I said in my CCF, we currently manage our water policies through city code and ordinances. These codes are only enforceable to the people that live here in the city of Safford. As we service customers throughout the valley, both in the county and in the town, this doesn't really work for us as we move forward. So what we're proposing is that we no longer manage through this code, but by policy and regulation. So this structure is similar to what we did with the airport, where it allows us to manage our business through regulations and policies instead of through city code and ordinances. This ability gives us to create this contractual relationship with our customers directly instead of through city processes, and provides our legal enforceability to all of our customers. So currently, in this presentation, I just put what we'll end up bringing back in 2 weeks with a code and ordinances, with a resolution and a code change. Within that, we got all the red lines in there so we could see exactly what was going to be removed, and then placed all these documents in their full course inside of our packets. So if you have something that I don't highlight in my presentation, please bring it forward. Brought a notepad so I can make some notes if I need to follow up with you later on. But we tried to highlight the major changes that we're going to have impacts throughout these policies. Some of them changed just a little bit, some quite a bit more. So tonight, we're going to work through our policies and our customer regulations, then look at the service agreement and our water facilities extension agreement. In 2 weeks, we'll bring back our fee schedule and our curtailment in this same process with a work session so that we can review those also and bring those comments into to our process. So within our policy and customer regulations, one of the highlights that I wanted to bring forward was in our new policy and regs, the landowners are going to be responsible to the city for ensuring all of the city rules are met by their lessees. So that's a policy where currently we only have contractual agreements with the lessee, the individual that has the customer specific. These individuals obviously own property in the city of Safford and are able to receive these amenities from the city, and we feel like they should be responsible with their lessee as far as following those rules and regulations. That was our biggest highlight change within our policies and our customer regulations. Just wanted to open up for it. Did anybody have any comments or specific to those policies and regulations they'd like to speak on before we move forward? Go ahead.
I had one comment, maybe question. Under the customer regulations, for instance, under 1.3, it talks about to establish and continue water service, landowner must install, and it says what the landowner must do, but it never really specifically says in there at the owner's expense. And I kind of wonder if maybe we want to specify, just so that there is no confusion, that these would be our expectations, that they would be at the owner's expense. I think that's also in like 1.4. So just maybe any of those that expectation is that the owner would be responsible for those costs. I think we would want to maybe call those out just so that it's very clear to the customers.
Okay, we'll take that into account. So I don't know if you have anything you want to hit those up specifically.
Yes. I think it's a good
Thank
idea.
you.
You're very good.
Like that. Like- I had two of them at least. Okay. Like, does this, okay, in the past, whenever we were to have a survey or uh, some changes, for example, say it involved Thatcher, we had to get some, they had to approve the person or the business that we were going to utilize to do that. Is that different, going to be different now, or that's still in the contract? They had to approve whoever we were using.
Sure. And I know this is a work session, so if you don't mind, I will address you directly instead of the formality. But yes, Vice Mayor Lopez, that's the whole purpose of all of this, is because really what you're doing is you're providing water service to people, not only in Safford, but extraterritorial in the county and in Thatcher. Well, right now, you know, when you deal with those other areas and other jurisdictions, there's a whole host of issues that just pop up because we're trying to deal with either the town or the county. This way, it's the responsibility of the landowner to get all that worked out. So the city of Safford and the utility department isn't wasting extraordinary amounts of time, money, and let's face it, political capital to just get a line ran down a street. You know, it's that simple. Let the landowner, say of the county who needs that right away or whatever the issue is, they can go talk to the county and say, county, I need this. Well, they're going to be much more responsive to their own citizens as opposed to the city of Safford, if that makes sense to you.
And also, yes, sir, thank you.
Can I just follow up just quick? Your question actually gets to the restated agreement. So the requirement that when we hire a vendor to do a rate study,
Right.
we have to go to Thatcher to get their approval. That's in the restated agreement, which is separate from these documents.
Okay.
So that's not changed.
All right. So, and also, like when we were low on water and we were installing, and we had tried to put restrictions in. Now we're going to be able to deal with the person individually, not because we weren't getting much support to curtail water usage, but now we might be able to.
So, Mr. Lopez, as you spoke to it, the curtailment was through city code, and so that to be ensuring that occurred was difficult policy and process. With this, I'll bring it back in 2 weeks and we'll review the curtailment plan and tariff specifically. But ultimately, in that same restated agreement, it talks about the fact that the town of Thatcher is supposed to support us in that curtailment. Through these policies and regs, it pulls it out of that requirement and now it makes it specific to that leasee or landowner specifically. So
So now we can have more leverage in requiring to work with us.
yeah, and as we go through that in 2 weeks, you'll see specifically what those enforcements look like.
Sorry, that kind of
No, you're great.
piggybacks on him, but like I know I accidentally went over my water and I got penalized on that. Does that mean someone in the county or someone in Thatcher can now also be penalized for overuse of water?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly what it'll
That
be.
makes it more fair.
And like I said, in 2 weeks, we'll bring that back specifically and talk about it just like we are tonight. There was so much information, we tried to split it kind of in the middle so you guys didn't try and swallow the whole fire hose.
And we're just kind of talking about individuals, but it goes for like institutions too, the college and
It does. Yep.
Right, and so the gist of the policies is that it provides us with an enforcement mechanism as a water authority that the ordinances would have only applied to the city, obviously, because they're city ordinances. These now are, if you sign up as a customer, you now have contractual relationships within these guidelines on how you use water. Ironically, in this instance, as with the previous one, there is a provision also in the restated agreement, which I do want to read. So there's a section 5 in the restated agreement under water shortage, equal treatment of customer classes. And the final sentence says, if any customer of Safford Water Service residing within the jurisdiction of Thatcher fails to adhere to water conservation measures applied by Safford to all customers of Safford Water Service, Thatcher shall cooperate with Safford in enforcing any such failure. So the restated agreement already had within it the provision that the town of Thatcher aided us in that enforcement. Now you'll have an additional layer, which is the administrative guidelines themselves, which will make that relationship direct. So that would give us more authority directly with the customer once we adopt these guidelines. So again, there's 2 layers here that are at work.
Does it help, like, say, the water director when he talks to individuals out there or contractors putting in subdivisions that they're treated just like our people here in Safford?
Yeah, so this policies will be a blanket process for everybody. It'll be identical.
So that helps us out in that area. Okay.
Yes, and your extension agreements really deal with development. So that's a separate policy within this that it directly addresses development.
So am I asking the wrong questions?
No, it's
Nope.
the exact right question.
We're getting there tonight. That one will be
All right.
in our policy tonight,
That
so.
policy
Okay,
is
because
addressed.
I certainly know we've had bumped heads, I guess, with pipe sizing or future development. You know, 100 houses are going in, but you only want to work on 20, which we know a little better.
Yeah,
But
it definitely
okay.
doesn't size it correctly.
So it'll strengthen the hand of the director a little.
It does.
That'll kind of give us a little bit of control over the expansion, new housing.
It does. If we don't have that capacity within our system, then we have that ability to restrict it, so.
I think the last one it seemed like we were obligated to work with was on the south end in Daly Estates. And they came for a request, it's been over 2 years, 62 homes at that time, down in the bottom part of Daly Estates. We were required, because we had the capacity to go forward with letting them have water. And now it's up to you.
So within our service agreement, this restated agreement that we have, it has a service area that's defined by an exhibit, and we're currently getting that legal meets and bounds put together for us. But moving forward, anything outside of that pre-approved exhibit within that service area would be a conversation piece that we can move forward with, where right now anything that falls within that is our service, so.
Your beginning sentence, you're identifying the actual boundaries of our service area.
We are.
Because like when we had trade for Central for the gas over here, it's not defined right, or it's not defined well
So-
enough.
So we just had a legal exhibit with a picture and lines drawn on a map, but no legal description of that. And so we're currently in that process of getting a legal meets and bounds description of our service area so that we can move forward with that. So
And
Yeah.
Central does have one, because we went through ACC on the exchange. So the part of Central that was taken does have legal meets and bounds already. What we're doing is mimicking that in the remainder of the service.
it's required for Graham County services because they have ACC as a regulatory
Okay, so our boundaries will be defined.
clearly. So jumping back to our presentation, if we took care of everybody's questions in that section, is around our service agreement. So on my slide here, I said it was on page 48 in our packet, so we could slide to it. It actually got changed to page 104. But that service agreement, if we look at it, is the exact same service agreement that we use today. So there's no change in that service agreement at all. As far as any regulations with the customer, it just provided in this as an attachment to these policies and regulations. And then tonight's biggest hitters within changes, as far as changes that are going to be occurring, are through these water facility extension agreements. And so, Mr. Lopez, this is specifically what you were just talking about. This clearly defines how expansion is going to occur, the expectations of the developer, master plan, how those facilities have to be defined, the engineers that have to be involved with it, the approval through the council, water production, how much water and what quality they have to bring to the table if they want to be included into our system. And those are all clearly defined in these extensions. Talks about construction risks and what the insurance requirements are going to be for those developers, how those facilities are regulated and authorized moving forward, and then the land transfers that are required, None of this was defined in our previous process, and so now it's clearly defined for all that want this development to move forward. They can clearly see what that path takes and the expectation and the requirements if they want to be part of the City of Safford Water Division. So
Do you think it's gonna increase, because you stated about backflow meters also and stuff. That's not gonna make it worse on people, is it?
no, I don't think there's any real policy changes in here that change a whole lot for our customers, other than it gives a clear expectation as far as what goes on for the things that are going to be coming in, how those expansions need to occur so that they don't inflict any impacts to our current customers.
Can we, outside our city limits, require backflow meters?
Because, yeah, in our current code, we don't have that ability because we can only enforce our code within the city limits. But once this process has been vetted, we go through all the comments and incorporate all of these changes and create these policies and procedures. At that point in time, anybody that receives water through the City of Safford Water Division will have to follow all of our requirements.
And we haven't had a way to block any contamination up till now, possibly, outside our area.
Yep.
City
No
limits.
enforceable policy that allows us to do that.
Okay, I'm ready again.
So that's all I brought for us this evening. As far as review,
Jason, when you said something about creating a legal for your service area. Is there any rules or regulations as to what you can take and can't take? Or what you can put in? I just really hate to see it look like an annexation and I'd like to see you take a section at a time. or
so
something.
if we go back, I don't have the restated agreement with me right now, but the exhibit that there mostly runs down section lines and quarter sections. I got a copy on my desk. I just don't have it with me here tonight. But it's not back alleyways and fence lines.
Good.
It's
Thank you.
sections.
Perfect.
So if we read the legal description of what came out of the central, I think it calls out 3 different sections down a section line, and that pretty much defined what it was. We just don't have that currently in our portfolio, and so we want to make sure we have that clearly defined moving forward for us.
And why that's important is going forward, based on the restated agreement, anything within the boundaries of the restated agreement, we're obligated to provide water to. Anything outside of those boundaries, we're not. So we can support those developments, but we're not required to find the water. They could be required to find their own. So we want to make sure that, again, I mean, looking long term, you don't want to be on the hook for development in the entire valley when that restated agreement has a very defined boundary. So within that boundary, we are responsible for providing water, but once you go outside of that, the developments that would occur at that point have to have the option of finding their own water. So we don't have to supply water. So that's going to be a very important distinction for us in terms of long-term development.
I thought you were gonna say something.
Just finishing up here. So tonight, really, the recommendation is just to review what we have. We have those additional policies coming back in 2 weeks. Ms. Flores will review this 1.3 and add those additional comments in there so that it incorporates those changes with it.
Jason, can you just go back to page 92 and zoom in on that a little bit? It's the beginning of your,
You got no numbers on your presentation?
I got numbers on my presentation.
right there.
And,
What?
Can you zoom in on that?
yep,
Take out those red lines.
I love them.
So,
They're meaningful. They need to be
Can't be
used.
pleased.
so those 5 items right there are going to be the universe that we'll be speaking to, of which he's covered several this evening, up to number 3. So we'll look at the fee schedule, which won't change, but will be adopted as part of the policies, and eventually they will change once the rate studies go into effect. and then the curtailment plan, which will be one of the final pieces, in which we've come up with a different methodology for dividing curtailment, which I think is more based on availability of water than on system capacity. So anyway, those 5 items are the policies in their entirety, and each one of them addresses a different issue. The idea of the extension agreements, that's the development piece. Curtailment is conservation, and so on.
It's work session.
Yeah,
No,
just
go
go,
ahead,
it's a work
Jessica.
session.
We're used
Well,
to
I
raising
didn't
our
know
hand.
who's-
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So can you kind of clarify the process for me? So we get to the end of this the next 2 weeks and we say, yeah, okay, we want to go through with this. What is the next step? Is this something that we have to send out to the public and let them know? Or once we approve it, it just goes through? How does this work?
So this is my understanding, and if I'm incorrect, I'll have Steve or John correct me, but we'll bring forth, so our next council meeting, we'll work through these other 2 documents. At that point in time, I'll bring a resolution forward to accept these as our rules and regulations. We'll create an ordinance that incorporates these red lines so that the code is then updated to reflect what you see on the screen today. And so we'll have an ordinance that then adopts these policies by reference through that amendment.
When does it become effective?
So it would become effective, the ordinance would be accepted, because there's no fee changes associated with the changes, there isn't a public requirement as far as 30 or 60 days announcement, and so it would come into effect. I want to say we have to post it for 2 weeks.
So next, Councilwoman Bratner, next meeting, he'll finish his presentation and he'll bring an ordinance at that time for the first reading. Then the following meeting after that, he'll bring that same ordinance for a second read. Once that's approved, it takes in effect 30 days after that.
And then we should do some public outreach on this. I mean, much of it will be as you need it. So if I do an extension agreement, I'll be a developer, I'm gonna come in. At that point, you're gonna engage with them with those rules. Some of the things like curtailment or even the service agreement hasn't changed, so signing up will be as it is now. But there should be some public outreach on it just to create awareness. But much of it will be needed as you engage. Things like changing who's responsible, like with the landowner, that's something we'll need to let folks know. So there should be some public outreach.
So a little clarification on that. You said landowner and lessee. So is that landowner, someone's renting from them, instead of making the renter the one who is being held responsible, it's now going to be the landowner? Is that what you're meaning? Just so I can
So
clarify
within that, both will be responsible. The leasee will be obviously the first, but with the transient rental group that we have in the valley, it really makes it difficult if the landowner doesn't have some buy-in to that process.
Makes sense.
Did you say earlier this could affect our rate study?
No, what it is that the rate study, once it's passed, your fees may change. So your fee schedule at that point would get updated, but these are separate and apart.
Separate than- I
So
thought
the rate studies basically will give you your cost structure. This is the implementation administratively, regardless of whether or not you did a rate change.
This is a big old bite, Mr. Brimhall.
It is. And I think it's something we've needed for years, and we're ready to step up and make the changes that need to occur for us.
They
so we
don't
can-
blame you for lawyering up.
Shouldn't, no. Well, and I'll use that as my last sort of summary, because the direction from John and Jason was very simple, and this is what we put into these agreements. First and foremost, every customer has to be treated the same. Doesn't matter if you're in Safford and out by Roper Lake or in Thatcher. It doesn't matter. Everybody's going to be treated the same under the same rules. You pay the same for the same service. You follow the same rules like backflow tariffs. So that was the number one point. The second point was that development's got to pay for itself. Okay? No more developers who are being subsidized by the current residents of Safford and the county and all those. There's no reason that current people paying their water bills should be subsidizing developers who are looking at this for a profit. Now, got nothing against developers. I represent a lot of them. And they know how to pay these bills and they know the game. So it shouldn't be a problem doing that. And then the third person is, or the third issue that I wanted to address is that you have to give your customers control of things. So like if there's an easement issue or a backflow issue, it shouldn't take the staff of Safford and Thatcher, the county, grinding out this issue for weeks and months and years. It should take a one-on-one conversation with the customer saying, hey, if you want service, you need to put a backflow preventer in. It's $150, and here's the guy who will certify it for another $200. That's how it should work. That's how it works everywhere. It's simple and it's efficient. When it gets complicated was when you start involving, various jurisdictions trying to figure this out because they all want to be, responsive to their own residents. I mean, if you're the city of Safford, you're going to support your residents. Well, that's just the same way. Here, it doesn't matter because if you want water service, it's all going to be the same. And that's essentially what the agreement, the restated agreement says too, is we treat everybody the same. And that's the overarching factors here. Everybody's treated the same, the customer gets control, and development pays for itself. That's simple.
This has been long overdue. I'm glad to see it happening now.
Mr. Mayor, this is Bill Sims.
Yes, Bill?
One of my jurisdictions, we serve water and sewer outside the town. And when we were confronted with water conservation measures, one of my counselors said exactly what one of your counselors said tonight. Well, why is it we're going to adopt an ordinance that only binds our residents and doesn't do anything to our customers outside of the jurisdiction? We adopted a policy. And that's what I think, Steve, and so I think it's a great idea. It worked quite well for us. John pointed out there is a wrinkle with rates. There's a separate statute there, and I think we have an agreement with Thatcher on that separately. Is that correct, John?
There is an agreement with water and with the county and with Thatcher, 10% above resident rates for the same
Okay.
service and 25% for the county.
Okay. This is a great idea. It worked well for my other jurisdiction.
Bill, this is Steve. Hi, Bill.
Hi, guys. We're old partners.
Yep.
Thank you very much, then.
Thank you, Council.
Appreciate your time.
Okay. And we'll move on to item number 2, the fiscal 2026 budget capital improvement plan.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm just going to get the slideshow up here. Give me one moment. So this presentation packet are designed to provide Mayor and Council with an overview of the FY26 capital improvement plan for discussion and review. Prior to this meeting, you all have the opportunity to pick up a draft capital improvement plan that I put together for this year. It outlines our current capital improvement plan as we have right now. It is a draft, so adjustments can be made as you guys give direction throughout this budget cycle. So the strategic goals, we have infrastructure development and maintenance, financial management, growth and development, intergovernmental cooperation, and then use of technology. The City of Safford's capital improvement plan was developed in order to further the city's commitment to the citizens of Safford by maintaining and improving the city's infrastructure. This program works to meet today's infrastructure needs as well as those of the future. The CIP is a multi-year plan that allows staff to prioritize projects and plan for the future and gives staff the ability to identify possible funding sources for projects. The CIP allows for an opportunity to foster cooperation among departments on projects. Planning projects includes a collaboration of all departments to ensure projects that can improve multiple areas of infrastructure work together and plan accordingly for more efficient projects. Staff met throughout the months of December and January to discuss the FY 26 through 2030 CIP. Throughout the process, staff have gone over the proposed projects, and the following packet is the draft CIP for 26 through 2030. As we go through this presentation, I'll highlight some of the newer projects as well as some of the ongoing projects and where we're at today with those projects. If you have any questions, you can ask me whenever during the presentation. And then I also have the book if you guys want to reference any of those pages. I won't be going through specific projects one by one, but if you do have a question on a specific project, I'll try to answer it the best that I can. In this presentation, we're going to go over the capital improvement plan, as well as the process for creating that plan, the funding sources that go into each of the projects, and then the different categories that we have come up with in the city and how the projects are put together. So what is a capital improvement plan? A capital improvement plan represents the city's plan to meet its public facilities and infrastructure needs. Major capital improvements and purchases are planned and tracked on a long-term basis. Departments assess needs, plan, and develop projects in conjunction with the engineering department. City management meets with departments to analyze and prioritize projects, and then this process allows for the city to apply funding to the highest priority projects. For our budget process, projects are identified during the budget and included in the CIP if they meet the following: the city's strategic goals, city's legal commitment to provide safe and adequate facilities and services, reduce operational costs, prevent or reduce future improvement costs, and then promote development.
Reduce operational costs. Where are you looking to reduce those? What does that mean exactly?
What would be an example of a project that would reduce operational costs? For example, water, if we're replacing water lines that are old infrastructure, where we would have to go out operationally and constantly work on those to maintain them, putting new pipe in the ground, improving infrastructure. Those would reduce operational costs year over year.
That's kind of the only way.
Agreed. Improving infrastructure would be a reduced operational costs. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any other examples right now, but maybe as I go through the presentation, I will point them out as an
Okay,
example.
I'd like that.
So our budget process starts in October for the CIP. Departments work with engineering to update the current year CIP, take inventory on the projects that they are currently conducting, and look at any future needs for those projects. They submit the projects to the city manager, finance director, or finance staff and engineering for review in November. In December, the departments present the projects to those same members. And then today, in February, it's presented to city council, and the city council provides direction on the capital improvement plan.
So the manager's already seen this
The manager has already seen this capital improvement plan.
and already has his input in it.
The manager has given input on the projects, but there haven't been many changes in order to reach council. Council has obviously the final say in what happens in the capital improvement plan. So no changes really have been made going into this process so that council has a clear picture of what we would like to bring as a budget for our capital improvement plan.
Do you think there's any projects that didn't make the grade and we're not seeing?
I think
There are some.
there are projects that are currently not in this draft that you will probably see before we adopt the final CIP.
But we don't have them now for consideration.
You don't have them now for consideration, but you will see them as we continue with the budget project. Again, our budget projects, again, this is a work session. I would like to get those to you prior to the adoption of the CIP, before we adopt the CIP.
And we can see those with enough time to look them over?
That is, have enough time to look them over, that would be, what would be enough time to look them over?
Next week?
Um, I would hope that we can get you something by next week, but no promises. There are some projects that I have in mind that probably need to be in this CIP that currently aren't.
Okay, then I'm legit.
As we continue on the calendar, April is what we're shooting for the adoption of the CIP, but that is a tentative timeline. It can be pushed to be more in line with our tentative budget adoption. It doesn't have to be in April. So if council feels that projects that we bring to you after this meeting that weren't in this draft, they need more time to consider that, we can push that out a little bit. There is some leniency in the timeline.
Well, I'm getting at, I'd kind of like to see what all staff had in mind. What they injected that didn't come out here also.
The draft CIP that you have in front of you is what department heads have presented to us. So if there's any projects that aren't in this, I guess would be confused as a department head hadn't brought it to us, if they feel like they couldn't have brought it to us.
Next week.
So as we continue down the timeline, like I said, in April is when we plan on adopting the CIP. So as we talk about these projects, we have to talk about the funding sources for these projects. There are two major funding sources in this, one of them being operating revenues, which that is the local sales tax, state shared revenues, fines, et cetera. And then for our enterprise funds, we have enterprise revenues in the terms of fees that we address through service there. I want to point out that for our operating revenues or our ongoing revenues, that's over what goes against our operating expenditures. So those operating expenditures are offset by operating revenues, and anything above that is what we put towards capital projects. So if there's not as much operating revenue over our operating expenditures, then there's not as much for capital projects. As we look at the one-time stuff, we have grants, loans, and bonds. You'll see that there are a couple projects that utilize grants. There's one major project in our CIP that utilizes a loan. And then currently, we don't have any projects that are bond funded. But as we continue to go through this process, there might be options to bond fund some things.
When will we get to see where we stand with our loans?
Are you talking about like an amortization where how much we've paid on certain loans or
Where we stand? Kind of like the police pension. That's a loan that we have out there. And we had even talked at one time, if we could make progress, we would pay even more into it than what we needed to. I don't know if we've ever done that, but where we stand with loans and things like that. When do we get to see that?
And so that's a good question. In my time with the city so far, I don't believe I've ever seen us present like a current loan status or our WIFA loan status on what we currently have left, or what the payment timeline looks like.
Here comes the money guy.
Here comes. You can assist.
Councilmember Vice Mayor Lopez, sorry. So the financial report, when we give you that, that's a great time to go over debt. There's a whole section in the financial report that covers specifically all of our debt and specifically calls out all the requirements. I know in previous ACFR presentations, we spent a lot of time with the auditor giving their feedback, but I can concentrate on that for the 2024 audit that we just went through, and I can show you where in that book you can see how much debt we have, how many payments we have left, and exactly what's due. So we'll spend a little bit more time during the financial audit to give you that information.
Thank you,
Because
sir.
a lot of the loans aren't necessarily capital related. Like the PES loan that you brought up is an operational type debt. It isn't related to CIP. So I think the financial presentation would be a great time for you to show that. So I'll focus on that this year.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Troy. Any more questions on funding sources for our projects?
I did notice, I didn't bring my book, but I did notice in one of, I think there was ball fields was one of them, and it said you know, we've budgeted for $1 million for that, and it says grants may be used. So is that something that you guys are considering, just going through whether or not we get those grants?
So that is correct. The ball diamonds, softball diamonds, that one is tied directly to a specific grant from the Arizona Diamondbacks, or I believe an organization that works with them. Some of the projects you'll see, if we don't receive grant funding, then the project won't happen. So they're only contingent on grant funds. Other projects you'll see, if it's stated in there that the project will continue regardless of whether we receive grant funds, just because of the nature of the necessity of the project.
Because like that one specific didn't say that. Another one said it wouldn't go forward without the grant. So I was wondering about that one.
I can't say for certain, but I believe that that project is contingent on receiving grant funds. The ball diamonds is contingent on receiving grant funds. It will not happen if we don't receive the grant funds.
Councilmember Bratner. So that one specifically is a little bit technical. There's certain parts of the CIP that we need to get to in order to apply for the grant, so that we need to build a bridge across the canal before we can even talk about that grant. So there's parts of that CIP that are guaranteed with city funds, but there's parts like the actual building of the ball field, which would be contingent upon grant. So we didn't specify that, and we probably could put better descriptions in that, but that's kind of the phasing of that project. There's certain parts we got to get to before we can even apply for a grant.
Okay. Because it did say the 100,000, but I wasn't quite sure what that was. And it didn't say it wasn't going forward without a grant. So I kind of needed.
And I can kind of give a little bit more detail specifically on that project. So the 100,000 is designed for the bridge in that area, and that bridge would be it actually would be to continue 26th there. Eventually, there's a plan to continue 26th there, and so that bridge would be used regardless of whether or not the ball diamonds got put in. So that's why a portion of the funding is general fund, and before we can even get the ball diamonds in, the bridge needs to go in.
And then my second question is through the book, so that we can identify, did you guys rank these in order? Like, so you've got different categories of the different CIP projects, but have you ranked them in order of how you want them approved, or which is the most important to go through, or are you just wanting all of them to go through? 'Cause like,
So
for an example, like the library wants the backyard done, but they also want drop boxes done. So I didn't know, is there a rank of what is most important to them that they definitely want approved, or how is that done?
So our typical process is that if a project's needed to be done sooner or it's a higher priority, it's done earlier in the capital improvement plan. If it's not as high of a priority, typically it's in the out years. In the past couple years, we've tried to get to a process where we do implement a prioritization of the projects. And as you might have seen in last year, I think in presentations by our former city engineer, there were numbers that prioritized those projects and how they were ranked. As that became more of an internal process and how our staff looks at the projects and how they rank them. So as projects become a higher priority or a higher ranking internally, they tend to move those projects up in our CIP, and the ones that are less of a priority or more developer driven or not a need to replace the infrastructure because it's still working at a level that we're able to maintain it at. They fall further into the CIP, but as time goes on, those have to be moved forward and they become a higher priority. So,
And the ranking that was done was something that I requested of the former engineer, who has since left the employ of the city. And basically, you would try to create some kind of a schematic that would allow you to do an assessment, like a weighted average, if you will. So we came up with numbers that would rank those projects. Now, for the most part, all the projects still ended up in the CIP, regardless of rank. So the ranking that you would do would be a baseline. That's where you would start. And in the process of working on those rankings, council had made priority certain items, like let's say El Paso Park, for example. So the ranking would go out the window anyway, and that project would move to the top. And so we've had several discussions on that. So the ranking process definitely would assist you in terms of looking at an assessment based on, but if you didn't know the tool, it wouldn't mean anything to you anyway. And ultimately, it's council that will decide on what gets put in and what gets taken out. So while rankings can help, they really need to be flushed out thoroughly. We took a early stab at that, and we did use it for a while, but it doesn't lock you into anything. It doesn't mean if something gets a ranking of 1 that all of a sudden that becomes a project and you have to move forward with it. There are other processes you can use. Again, you can use committees, to look at capital projects. So again, even if you had a ranking system, it wouldn't lock you in anything.
And kind of, a point there is, you'll see one of our airport projects was actually in year 2030 of our CIP, in last year's CIP, or 2029 rather. And because we were able to move up in ADOT's process for receiving a grant, that project actually catapulted into this upcoming year because grant funds became available. So even though that project was a lower priority because we weren't going to be receiving grant funds last year, this year it ended up moving up. So it's things like that that kind of, there's a nuance to the ranking and that makes it difficult. But like the city manager said, ultimately it's council who ranks the projects on what they deem to be important for the CIP. I bring to you what projects have been proposed by departments, and then ultimately council is the one that decides, is this a project worthy of the funds that we have allocated for it in the upcoming 5 years?
And the other part of this that we've done over the past 3 years, what I've tried to do is not have a wish list for the CIP. What I had encountered when I started looking at the CIP is we put projects in there with all the intention of doing them. So a great example is the fire station. So we had $5 million for a fire station. We carried it over and over and over and over. No design, no plan, no needs assessment, just a number in a box on a sheet of paper. So we went in and we pulled a lot of those projects out. We had projects that they called developer driven. If a developer comes into town and they want to do that road, we'll make it happen. Well, the problem with that approach is that you end up with a lot of projects that there's no way they're ever going to get built. So what drives your CIP? Well, what drives your CIP is the same thing that drives your operating budget, the availability of funds, right? And so those funds dictate basically how far your dollars will go. And so we've tried to trim out and lean out the CIP as much as possible based on the actual ability to construct those projects within the time frames. Now, I think we know that there are a number of projects that have lingered for quite a long time. That becomes a different issue. That's more of a management issue, right? Why is that project taking a long time to get built? Is it resources? Is it personnel? Is it the fact that we need to contract it out? Is it a supply chain issue? So there are a lot of things that drive the CIP other than just ranking it. Now, that being said, ultimately, it really is the council that then will look at your CIP and determine. So, for example, the project that you brought up on the park, that was a council request that we look at that. And in doing that, there were a lot of components that went into making that project happen, not least of which was getting across the canal. So we had to buy the land, we have to get across the canal, which ultimately then puts us in a position to apply for that grant with a much greater probability of success. So these are really complicated, and ultimately, like anything, it's predicated on your ability to pay and then really on council value. What is it that you want to see happen? So as you look at those, you can either move them around, move them back or in or out in time, and you can also take some out and you can add some in, right? So that's why we make the presentation to you guys, because ultimately, you will decide on the capital projects that we do.
So in the blue book, the projects that we have in front of us, Mr. Hochul says there's more that you want to add to this blue book. Is that what you were saying? Or we needed to consider these differently?
No, the first statement is correct. There's more projects that will probably be added prior to you guys seeing the final draft of this. This is just the first draft. There could be another draft before that, and then a final draft before we end up adopting it when council has made their decision on what they feel is appropriate for the CIP. As this goes on, this budget process, I remember started in October. Departments had to submit these to me by the first week of November. So since then, we've had 3 months now where additional projects could have come up, where council gave direction on specific things that hadn't been submitted yet. And so they hadn't been we haven't developed sheets for them or put them in the budgets. And so as this process continues, we'll try to get those in front of council so that they can view them in a timely manner to determine whether or not they should be in the CIP. And I know that as this process went on, talking with the city manager, talking with staff, there are a couple of projects that did not make this book that should be in this book.
And in fact, would be, I think, near and dear to your heart because you had raised some issues on some of the projects that will appear. And so actually it was Mr. Hoschel that recognized that they weren't in there, but it relates to some facilities that we have that you had talked about with me that were kind of falling into some level of disrepair, and those should be in there, right? And again, that feedback helps us. It's just that we didn't get those in there, so we'll bring those back around and put them in. Likewise, we did put some stuff in. You'll notice on fire. Would have liked to have had a work session on fire because we had talked about that fire station and the alternatives. In the past few months, we've had some really good conversations on that. We came up with a different approach. We will show you that approach, and in the next meeting, we'll have another work session directly addressing the fire station so we can get feedback from council. I would have preferred if they were flipped, but we didn't get it done that way. So some things we added with the intent of rolling it out and letting you see it, but we have a conversation that still needs to happen. So there'll be more work sessions on the CIP as we go forward.
I have a question. Once you do take feedback from us, and let's say some of those items do come into the capital projects, will you identify to us which items maybe have moved up into the list and maybe are using general fund balance rather than excess revenues within that current year? Will you identify that for us in case we're
Generally speaking, anything done in the CIP is going to be fund balance driven. It won't necessarily, because the excess revenue happens in the prior year. So when that excess of revenue over expenditure occurs in the operating side, those additional funds go into the fund balance. It's then from the fund balance where you take one-time money, because now it's one time, it's in the fund balance, and you assign it to the projects. That's how you figure out what you can afford in the general fund, for example, specifically, but all the funds are built that way. So generally, it's that, as Mr. Hoschel stated, it's the excess of the ongoing revenue over ongoing expenditures, which then ends up in the reserve. It's now one-time revenue, which you assign to one-time capital projects.
And carryover stays in the fund?
Carryover is those reserves that have already been earmarked for a project but didn't get finished. So you're simply saying we're taking it out of the actual budget and we're putting it into that carryover. It now is in that savings account, but it's been identified for a specific project or projects.
And it still exists?
Yes,
okay.
it does.
I'm sorry. I just have one more for you. I found why I had my original question. Is because like on golf course, it says cart barn door repair is for fiscal year 2026, but cart barn roof repair is for 2027. So that kind of threw me. I was like, why would you repair a door if the roof has a hole? Because based on the picture we received, I didn't know if those are two separate cart barns because I don't want to repair a door if I can't even use it because there's no roof. So that's why I was asking if there's a ranking, because I would think you would want to replace the roof before you replace the door, unless they're two separate buildings.
That is a good point, and that's a good question. I do not know for sure if the barn door is for the one with the roof that is damaged, or if it's all of the barn doors. Somebody's coming to help me, aren't they?
Good evening, council. They are two separate buildings.
Okay. Thank you.
And I would hope that question, and I can't remember because we've had so many meetings on these, that question was asked during this process, like, hey, what's the timing on these? These are great questions, right? These are the questions that we try to ask during this process. And I hope that we can get to asking those questions because it is important that the timing of those, because like you said, you don't want to replace a door and then have a leaky roof and then have to replace a door again, right? That's not a good management of the funds. So they are separate buildings, but thank you. And I just do want to point out too, there's a lot of questions about different things and we're using a lot of different terminology here. I did in the back, if you got to the back of the binder, I did put in some glossary of terms that have some sort of definition for what we might be talking about, some terms. If there's other terms that we use during this that you guys have questions, like can you define what that is? If I can't get you the definition, I'll try to send it out, what it means, or get you more of a better answer of what that terminology is as we go through this process. I want to continue to do that with the budget because I know that I stare at this stuff all day, right? I see all the numbers, I look at all the terminology all day. So when I use acronyms or different things, that's like just normal speak for me. I understand that council does not normally do all that. So I want to give you guys and paint you guys the best picture for what this stuff is without skipping stuff or glazing over certain things that may not be first nature to all of you. So in the back, there is a glossary though. Any more questions on the funding sources? If not, this is the 5-year, including carryover overview of the funding sources broken down. I did get a comment from some council members that this was difficult to view. Going forward, I won't use a color scheme similar to this. I'll try to make it more defined on what the differences are. I understand that this can be difficult to read, and so I'll change that going forward. But as we look at this chart, you can see our 5-year proposed budget for the CIP is $89,836,000 and some odd dollars. Our largest portion of that is our carryover year. As we look at our carryover in our FY26, that's a total of $46 million, or $46.7 million of that $89 million. Of that $46 million, 37% of it is grant funds or prior year ARPA. So that's money that had been put into our fund balance that is a carryover now. So it's currently sitting in our fund balance that's already allocated to be spent, as well as the prior CARES funding. I'll just explain them because it could be difficult to see based on the color scheme. But the lower section of the stacked bar, that's just general fund. So that's straight over operating revenues, over operating expenditures revenue. So general fund expenses. The next one is our grants fund. So that lighter gray is the grants fund portion. And then above that, you can see only in our carryover is a loan funded, and that is your Sanchez Road project, the Water Sanchez Road project. The next stack above that is our HERF funds. And then the darker gray on the very top of all of the stacked bars is our enterprise funding. So that is revenues from enterprise funds above operating expenses in those enterprise funds. Any questions on this chart or slide? So that's all for our funding sources. As we break down the categories, these are what we have decided are a good way to reflect the different needs or the different areas in the city. The first one being general government. This includes economic development, the library, the fire station. It includes business services and then also IT. It will also include facility maintenance, but currently in this draft CIP, there are no facility maintenance projects. You'll have parks as another area, airport, golf course, streets, and then the rest of our enterprise funds.
But you're not putting any money up for facility maintenance?
In our current draft plan that I have in front of you, there were no projects that met the threshold of being a capital project.
Sometimes there weren't inspections done and we got surprised.
So in order for a project to be in the CIP, it needs to meet the $5,000 threshold, above $5,000, and then it becomes a capital improvement project. If the cost is under $5,000, then it doesn't meet the threshold of being a capital improvement project. So inspections, those are normal operating expenditures. It's not like a one-time capital project that we need to budget as a capital plan or capital project. It would just be in the operating budget of facility maintenance. So there wouldn't need to be a project for that type of thing.
Some of them do, so you'll find them.
Any other questions on categories?
back in some of it, before I do forget, I don't think we've accounted for, it's almost our turn to receive money from Seago.
For CDBG,
Yes.
the last
Which is-
CDBG funding we received was in 2023, so that would have been fiscal year 24, Lance? So we're on a 3-year cycle,
Or,
and is it a 4-year cycle
believe.
between County Thatcher Pima and us. So we wouldn't be up until 2027. So not this year, but the next year. And there are projects that are CDBG eligible in the streets budget. Lance does a good job of staggering them as the funds become available. So you'll see some of them are his patented sidewalk projects
Yeah.
that we see on the street CIP. So as we get closer to that process, I know that there's projects that we bring to you guys. Seago has a really good process in how they present those CDBG eligible projects to you. We go through and they have a separate process in which we have to bring them to council. Council has to look at them and then come back and approve the CDBG eligible project. They have, it's a very strict timeline in which they have to follow, I believe. So as we get closer to that, you'll see more of that. Any more questions on that slide? Or general questions? If not, again, this is another one with the color scheme. Going forward, I will change it. I'll try to explain it to you the best I can so that it is more understandable based on the color scheme. But this is the program distribution. So this is the 5-year CIP and the percent of each program and how they're broken out for the expenditure. As you can see, water's at 33% of that 89 million. Airport's 15%. General government's 12%. Streets is 12%. Parks 11%. Wastewater, electric, and then gas. And that includes all funding sources. So that's not just the enterprise funds or the operating revenues. That includes all of the grants, all the loans, everything that goes into funding the projects in those program areas. So as we looked on previous slide about funding source and the different funding sources, this is different because this is what that department will be expensing, regardless of the funding source.
From all funds.
Correct.
What are the two itty bitty teeny lines under gas?
The itty bitty teeny lines under gas, one of those is landfill and the other one's sanitation. Which sanitation currently does not have any, and then landfill does not have enough to have a percentage.
Okay.
Out of the 89 million. I believe their total, I'll let the look ahead. We'll see it at the end here, but I think it's only 150,000. So that's not even a percent of 89 million in this.
Now, the airport, that's the newest one on here. And it's
Newest in terms of program area.
newest in terms of that big piece of the pie.
The airport is a large piece of the pie. As we look at the airport, it's unique because the majority of their projects are grant funded. And a lot of the projects only require at max, I think, a 10% match. So a lot of these large projects, which are like $2 million, $1 million projects, we only have to do 10%. So although that's a large section, the majority of those are grant funded. So you would say probably like 1 or 2% of that 15% section is actual general fund or airport funds.
So that big a piece doesn't mean we've taken away from the other departments.
This pie chart only depicts the portion of the $89 million broken up in percentages. It doesn't mean that 15% is taking away from, say, facility maintenance or
Streets.
well, streets is unique because it's a special revenue fund. So streets functions off of the special revenue. There's the half-cent sales tax that council put into place that they give a portion, and anything above what they're operating expenditures. So streets has an operating expenditure. Anything above that goes to their projects. And typically with streets, they have a 4-year cycle on larger streets projects because at that point, as we talk about fund balance and their operating revenues above operating expenditures, 4 years looks like it's the sweet spot right now for streets in which they get enough money in fund balance to fund those large streets projects.
They never get enough money.
And unfortunately, vehicle license tax, one of their large revenue sources, stays relatively flat. As we see through in this budget process, I'll bring to you guys revenue estimates. But vehicle license tax is one of their large revenue sources, and that remains relatively flat. The other one is fuel, what you pay at the pump. There's a tax, and the state shares that back as cars become more fuel efficient, or we get more and more electric vehicles. That number also decreases. So unfortunately, the current model on the state shared portion of HERF is decreasing and is not helping our streets. Any other questions on this pie chart and the program distribution? If not, we're going to get into the category overviews. I'm going to go through and kind of point out newer projects or projects that are bigger on these lists. I don't plan on going through every single one. If you do have specific questions like you guys have already given on specific projects, feel free to ask them and I'll try to answer them. If not, this is a work session, so all these lovely people out here who are department heads or also work for the city can give an answer if I can't, or we can get you at a later date. So as we go down this list,
But what do the asterisks mean?
as we go down this list, the asterisk stands for new projects.
New project.
New projects. So they're new to this year's CIP.
Okay, new to this year's CIP.
So
Okay.
and I'll go through and I'll point out the ones that have asterisks. So the remote hold lockers for the library, the fire station master plan conceptual design, fire station renovation, upgrade to fire training facility, replacement of 800 megahertz radios, self-contained breathing apparatus replacement, meter replacement project, court AV upgrade, fleet management software, network infrastructure upgrade, and police ruggedized laptops are all new projects. So as we go down this list, I do want to point out there is the library annex backyard. That was a project in the prior year CIP. I know there was discussion on whether or not we were going to continue with that because of the conversation regarding a new fire station at that location. As we had conversations with the fire chief, moving forward, there's a different plan on what we're going to do. And so that no longer became something that we wanted to consider at that location. He will be coming back in the next council meeting. Like the manager said, hopefully we could have had that reversed. You can blame that on me because I was pushing to get this on the agenda. But you can look and see underneath remote holds lockers, you have those 5 projects. Those are all new fire projects. So the new fire chief looked at our CIP pretty comprehensively and came up with a pretty good plan on what he wants to do in the upcoming 5 years. So that those new projects are a reflection of that and his plan going forward. Yes, ma'am.
All right, we're on fire.
We're on
With
fire.
the upgrade to the fire training facility, yes, we love our firefighters, we do. But you want to upgrade it, and I did see that that was contingent on receiving funds from other sources. We haven't had the best record of being able to collect from them. If we go through these and there is not participation of helping and fund these, what is the plan? Does Safford stay on the hook for 2.7 million, the residents, or what is the plan with that? Is that contingent also upon receiving money from the other entities?
I don't want to steal our new fire chief's thunder. I do believe he's going to talk pretty comprehensively about this in 2 weeks. I can give just a brief of what I believe his plan is for that going forward. So as you see the first 2601, FR 2601, the fire station master plan and conceptual design, that's designed to see if the space is even, if we can even go forward to have something like an upgrade to that fire training facility. Or, so I'm sorry, I'm speaking about something else. Let's continue with the fire training facility. So yes, that's a separate project. That has nothing to do with our fire station. So the fire training facility is actually out across the river. That is based on whether or not we do get buy-in from the neighboring communities. And so whether or not we do get that, I do believe the project is not going to happen. So that it is contingent on that. Somebody's behind me. You have any other more comment? Okay. Sorry, I got kind of mixed up with a couple of things there. I do want to point out though, unrelated to the training facility, but I hope that answered your question. the fire station master plan is conceptual design. This is to see whether or not the space over there where the current fire station is can be redesigned into something that's more usable. Maybe building renovations that need to take place. So that $33,000 would be design money to upgrade that existing facility. Another one that I want to point out is the meter replacement project. So that might be sticker shock for a lot of the council members up there because it is a $1 million project every year. This is it's based out of business services, and as we go through the budget, we'll talk about how internal services work. But this meter replacement project is in the internal service fund, and what it is replacing all of our current meters throughout the city, all electric, water, gas. Currently, our advanced metering infrastructure department goes out and they read all the meters, and business services collects the data, and then they bill customers. So as the meters age out, they don't become as reliable and they need to be replaced. We're getting to a period where we installed meters 10, maybe more years ago, and they aren't becoming reliable and we need to replace them. Unfortunately, they're all hitting at a point where it's a large portion. And as we continue to provide services, utility services, the meters need to be updated and replaced. That number is going to be an ongoing number for years and years and years to come, because that is the cost of having those meters and having those utilities and providing those services. So it may be sticker shock. That is something that we need to replace those meters. And so that's why, as Troy and I looked at kind of comprehensively as what we do at the city, and that department in particular, that was one of the things that was brought to our attention. You know, these meters are aging out and need to be replaced. And as we looked at the whole city and all the meters, we talk about asset management and GIS already. As we looked at GIS and putting those meters in, we found that a lot of the meters were aging out. And so this project is to keep up those meters so that we don't get to a point where they're all at once and we get hit with, instead of $1 million a year, it's $10 million in 1 year because our meters don't work anymore.
So on the meter, you did say that because we were aging out of warranty, so now we're going into a new warranty, but we're still going to be paying $1 million a year. Are we making sure that maybe those ones that are coming close to warranty are getting replaced under warranty, or we just waiting for them to fail?
So we typically wait, a meter can go for 10 years. We don't replace it prior to it hitting it. When it hits its warranty, we take it out of the ground. We're looking at meters systematically throughout the city. So we're breaking the city up into 10 different zones and doing one zone every year for the next 10 years, and then starting all over again when the warranty is up at 10 years with that same zone again 11 years later, and going through the city systematically. This is important. It may be, I just want to point out one thing. It shows up under general government here, and you might get the impression that the general fund is paying for this. This is paid for completely by the utilities. It just happens to be a fund that falls under our finance department, so that's why it's shown in this area. But this is 100% paid for by the rates that you currently pay for water, gas, electric. This project also abuts, if you've noticed, we've got a grant in the past for gas meter replacements. This project does not undo that. This just adds on to that. So technically, we spend about $1.5 to $2 million a year in meter replacement. Gas has a separate project because they did get a grant to get their gas meters replaced. So we're trying to work together, but systematically get through those capital replacements, because when a meter stops reading at 10 years, there's a lot of things we have to do in our department. We give an average bill to the customer and then put in a new meter. But yeah, staying on this and not letting meters get to the age that they got to. The last time we replaced meters was in 2013. So our meters are long past their warranty and they're starting to all fail at once. So we can't have that happen. So we need to systematically get to it on a cyclical basis. This is just something that cities do with utilities. You just come up with a meter replacement plan and you stick to it. We're officially getting that back into our CIP and focusing on those type of things, because this is how we receive half the funding of the city comes from old utilities, right? So I need to make sure their meters are correct. I need to make sure that they're reading correctly. So this is just ensuring that, but we won't, again, replace the meter before it's hit its warranty. If it's still warranty, we'll try to reuse that meter wherever we can in whatever new zone hasn't been touched. But yeah, it's a tricky process that we kind of got away from a few years ago, and we're just trying to get back to it.
Are they stopping working because they're right at 10 years? I mean,
No, it's typical that you find that a water meter is 10 years, a gas meter can sometimes be 15 years. But electric meters at about 10 years, they can't guarantee the accuracy of them anymore. So if a customer is complaining that they think their meter's inaccurate, we can, at that point, all we can do is replace the meter because even the manufacturer is telling you that I can't guarantee that the reading is correct.
Okay.
It's not to say that it's incorrect. I don't want everyone calling tomorrow saying their electric is wrong. It's just we can't guarantee the reliability like we would like to.
Okay.
Have I caused panic? Okay.
On this page, I'll also point out, there is an error on my part. The project for the court AV upgrade is not 44,000. It should be corrected to 22,000. So I know that was a correction that I had made prior, and I don't think, unfortunately, I didn't get it into the packet. So that's on me.
I know we talked about interagency cooperativity or cooperability. So
Cooperation?
this is a great example of interagency cooperation. So we met with the town of Thatcher and the town of Pima, and we share the court system with them, and we talked about this audiovisual system, and they're more than willing to participate, given our current contract and the current clauses there. They're willing to participate in this project. So our requirement for this project to be cooperation with our neighbors is only $22,000. So this is a good story that people are willing to participate if you just present them the information and let them know.
Other than that, I don't have anything else I want to point out on this page that I don't think speaks for itself or is in the notes.
Matthew, in the packet on page 15, you have City Hall improvements. Is that a project that should be on the summary, or was that an accident that was put in there?
That was accidentally put in. That project, as we reassessed and looked at costs, it did not meet the threshold in what it'll be more operating than it will be a project. So good catch. That will be taken out.
Okay.
And as I move into the final draft, it will no longer be in there. But thank you.
Okay. And then the fleet management software, could that be an internal service cost rather than that entire cost being to the general fund?
That's a good point too. Kind of similar to business services. Again, this is general government. It's not general fund. If you look at all of those MUs, those are IT projects. Those are cost out to all users of IT, which is almost every single department. It's not just the general fund. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this, because all of the departments pay IT and the cost is then paid from IT, which resides as an internal service. But
So as a source of funds, you have it listed under general, but it really will be
correct.
split. Okay.
As
Just wanna make sure.
the department charges that out,
Right.
the funds will be collected from all of the internal service users, but will be paid for by the general fund, although all the funding sources coming from
Okay.
the internal service
I just want to make
users.
sure that was happening
Yes.
because it was listed as general.
Yes,
I just want to make
yes.
sure that.
That is
okay.
how it's going to happen
Okay.
with all of those internal service
Okay.
ones.
Perfect. That's all I had.
So next we'll go to parks. That one starts in your books on page 31. So here we have no new parks projects, but the ones that I do want to point out is the 8th Avenue and Discovery Park City Park, which will now be called Jason Couts Park. That one includes the sewer portion of the project. So I do believe that has already gone out to bid and the process has started for that project. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. If you need to finish, mine's on a different part of that.
Maybe I'll answer it.
The reclaimed pond, I really don't want to go sit by a poop pond. Is this part of the Riverwalk project that we're holding on? Because when I looked at that, it literally looks like you're going to sit right by the plant, which I don't,
So that project is sitting right by the plant. It is improvements at the reclaimed pond. It also, I do believe it includes better fencing as well as
and a dog park.
Lance is coming up to talk about it. But I do believe it is in conjunction with that linear park coming online.
Yes, that's correct. If that linear park goes, it would basically just kind of, the linear park would go right around that pond. We would maybe add a few benches or trees or something around there just to kind of beautify it and make it part of that linear park project. It's in the outer years, kind of waiting for that to happen.
So it is waiting on that one.
You're wondering why they're putting benches by a smelly place?
Didn't think I wanted to go sit there and smell the odor.
Okay.
I mean, and the question I had is, I don't know if you've driven down there, but there's a lot of homeless that are living down there. There's like some almost permanent vehicles, I would call them. So that was part of my question of, I'm sure if the Riverwalk goes in, that would be alleviated, but
I would hope. Another thing that I want to point out is if you see the tilde in front of the chip seal cemetery roads and then the cemetery expansion, that indicates that project is actually going to be funded by cemetery care funds. So in the department budgets, departments that currently reside on cemetery land or that have buildings located on cemetery land pay an annual fee to the cemetery care fund. And then those funds in turn are used to maintain the cemetery. So a lot of the projects that are done at the cemetery were funded because currently those departments pay an annual fee to that. And then we talked about the baseball, softball fields. So
Oh,
one of the
Matt.
projects you won't see on there is El Paso.
Go ahead.
But we will, in talking with our public works director today, that will come back on. We do anticipate that there will be a little bit of carryover in, I believe he said a couple 100,000. So that will be added back on.
I just had a question on the shared use path lighting. It's all the way out to 27, and I've had a few people ask about that lighting, and I knew it was coming, but I wasn't sure when. I'm wondering if there's any possible way we could move that up to 26. And I know the lighting is from, 14th? Kind of comes down 14th. But doesn't the shared use path also go from that spot on 14th to 26th? And is there any possibility to put some lighting there? I know it's kind of a,
Yes, the shared use path does go from that section to 26th, and then it also continues all the way down to Golf Course Road there. I know that Lance is behind me, isn't he?
That's a good question. The reason we moved it out was to kind of wrap up some of these other projects that we've got to get done, and then we would get that one to do that 60,000 would do from the new Jason Cows Park along Discovery over to Glen Meadows Park. That would light up that section of path, and then the section you're talking about out through Conquistador Estates is an ongoing issue that we're trying to work to resolve something in Conquistador to where we can actually do something out there and get that developed. And as that develops, that path would still remain there, and maybe we could light it out through there. So don't want to do too much out in there where it's, we do have the right of way out through there where the path is, we own it. But as that's developed, maybe that needs to shift a little bit. So I don't want to do too much out there that may have to be moved as they maybe develop that.
okay.
Any other questions on parks? If not, we will continue on to airport. That one can be found in your binder on page 39. Like I said before, lots of airport projects are grant funded with the max typically around 10% match. The one I did want to point out is we did add another commercial hangar development. As our airport is growing, so too is the need for hangars. Cameron our airport manager talks about how large the list is waiting to get into hangars, and we can't build them as fast as the list is growing. And so that's a good problem, but we need to have hangars to house the planes that are utilizing our airport. So we did add another commercial hangar development project. There currently is one in carryover in the current year that will that we'll get to in the next fiscal year. There's also a new project in the runway navigational aid upgrade. This is to improve the software or the infrastructure out there. It's just aged out of what we believe is useful at the airport.
With your number one project,
Number
you
one.
show it as carryover, the 500,000 for the hangar?
Yes.
Is that currently being worked on now, or because there's no date of when it's,
So we currently just signed the lease to develop those hangars. Right now, they're finishing the T hangars, the ARPA funded T hangars, and I think Cameron's here.
Councilwoman Brenner, so the T hangars are in active development. You should probably have seen some Facebook posts. Those are currently in the process, and those will be done by the end of the year. The first commercial hangar is currently in design. We're working with our engineer and with the FAA to get NEPA clearance. All major projects at the airport require environmental clearance, so that process is currently underway. So we should be starting on that commercial hangar here soon. We already have a company that is going to be the recipient of that next hangar. And these commercial hangars, as it denotes, they're used for businesses. So this next hangar would hopefully be to bring in a new business from outside the community.
so will hangar one not starting yet? Will that delay hangar number two, or will you start that one?
If we will be able to proceed consecutively, it's just dependent on these projects are dependent on a company signing a lease for that hangar. So we already have the guaranteed revenue before we start construction.
And while Cameron's up here, I want him just to talk briefly on the process that took way for runway 1230 mill and overlay, because that was a project that we had in the out year that we did end up moving up because grant funds became available.
Absolutely. So as you note here, that runway 1230 mill and overlay project is in the CIP for only $190,000. This project is slightly different from most of our grant-funded projects. Most of our grant-funded projects, the city expends the funds and then requests reimbursement from the FAA or from ADOT. In this case, this project falls under the Arizona Pavement Management System. So ADOT Aeronautics has a special program where they come in, they do the design, they do the construction management, they do all the administration. All we do is we cut them the check for our match, and they take care of everything else. So from an expenditure perspective, we're not expending the full $1.9 million. This project, we did get an announcement from ADOT that they do intend to fund this project sooner than expected, which is the reason why it moved up from 2030 to 2026. They completed a project 2 years ago in which the contractor didn't fully comply with the bid spec, and so we had some issues with that repair not essentially being effective. So they're going to come in and do a much more expensive project that will actually further extend the life of that surface out to 10 years. And it'll be a worthwhile investment for the airport. It'll also increase the weight limit on the runway as well.
Another thing I want to point out about airport is that we do have consultants at the airport that they come and working with the city manager and then our airport manager develop a ASIP, an airport capital improvement plan. And I don't know how many years out theirs goes. It might be 10, 5. So they developed that prior to this. So most of these have already been developed by a consultant on what they feel like the proper course of projects should be at the airport. Any other questions on airport? Capital improvement airport. So next up we have the golf course. This one is on page 53. There should be asterisks by the cart barn door repair and the cart barn door or roof repair. That will be changed in the final. But I just do want to point out that those are new projects. And as we talked about earlier, they are separate buildings so that we won't be repairing the door on one as we repair the roof on the same one in the following year. We do have another one I do want to point out is the irrigation system. So in prior CIPs, we had a number out there that we didn't know whether or not that number was the actual cost for a new irrigation system. The $15,000 carryover is design money. That design money will use that to get a design for a golf course irrigation system. And as we go forward into the next year for our CIP, we'll have a more accurate number of what an irrigation system will cost instead of just constantly, like we had mentioned earlier, a wish list of what it could or should be. We don't want to have that number just lingering out there with an unknown of what it really is. And so that we would like to do a design prior to putting a figure out there in the following year.
And the kitchen remodel, that's in carryover, is that just hanging out there, or is that in process, or is that getting started?
That is in carryover because it has not been started yet. I do believe that it will be started in talking with the golf course manager like this summer going into fall. Yes? Yes. Any more on golf course? Next up is streets. The largest one on there is the improvements at Hollywood Road. That is a carryover. Portion of that is a utilities funded portion. The rest of that being from the HERF fund. I said I would point out the ones that are CDBG eligible projects. And I believe it is the, not second from the bottom. It is, Lance is going to help me, I know. We moved them out. Okay. So they're not currently on here. We'll probably see them next year. One of the things that as we work through the CIP, there's projects that we don't feel as we meet and talk with department heads. We go through the process of whether or not they should be in the CIP or if they're just wish list items, or if they're too contingent on whether or not we receive grant funding. So we do put them in, we call an appendix. And then those projects we review and see if those projects would need to come back in the following years if we've met the threshold of actually being in the capital improvement plan. Because like we talked about, we don't want to just have projects in here that are wish lists that are never going to happen. But it is important to recognize that that's a possibility down the road. And if we do receive funding or if it comes to the forefront, we already have something, a page that's already put in place that we can pull out and then drop in the next year's CIP or bring out of budget process if it really needs to happen that soon. Any questions on streets?
Yes. 1901, the extension 14th Avenue connection, 24th Street, Highline Canal. Is that building the bridge over the canal?
Yes, sir.
And that's something that's needed. What's holding us up there?
Design to see what the cost would be for that project. And then there's 2 million out and for the years. I don't, I'm gonna have Lance answer this one on why we moved it out.
Do you have an idea where we're talking about?
So it's out there, so it's still in our radar. That doesn't mean it can't be moved up. As we get to where we can develop some of this, hopefully develop maybe some of that Conquistador area, that's gonna push this issue. So we're still working on that issue. We're trying to get Conquistador Estates to where we can actually start to develop. As that area develops, this becomes more of a need, and we'll definitely move that up. So it's on there to keep it on our radar. We do want to get it designed so it's shelf ready. Maybe there's a grant we can go out and put in for if we've got a set of design plans ready to go. So it's just sitting out there waiting to be moved up as the need comes up.
I kind of hoped it was the other way around. Once we got that done, they would want to develop in Conquistador Estates.
Well,
And also to alleviate some of the traffic on 20th.
if we can get that developed, that's kind of what we've talked about, is if we can get somebody to start to develop that, then that would be kind of the city's contribution, because we'd have to bring sewer up that way probably, and then develop that road to their entrance. And so that would kind of be our incentive to keep them pushing to develop that area. Plus it's access down, down towards the high school. Eventually we want to do 20th Street across for another access over to the hospital. So it'd kind of be all that would be tied together.
It's key junction right there.
Yes, it is. That's why it's on here, just to keep it on the radar. We want to get it designed and ready to go.
And the influent water, I forget now, it crossed there
Yes, yes, it did. It come right up 14th Avenue
and the fiber.
and the fiber.
Now all we need is a road.
All we
and
need is a
pretty bridge
road and a sewer line.
And a sewer line.
Yep.
Next one I'll talk about is landfill. This is on page 67. The total landfill is 135,000 for all of the years. The drainage spillways, we had installed a couple in prior years. Currently, the size of the landfill does not warrant those, but that project is out there for when it does reach the size that we'll need additional spillways. And then as we undergo our BLM assessment of the property and what that would require, the landfill expansion is in there for the property that we're talking with BLM with now. Any questions? Next up is water. So as I mentioned before, the largest part our project in water is the East Valley Sanchez Road project. The majority of that being funded by a loan from USDA. And there's also grant funds in that project that are tied with the grant funds at East Lebanon. So those two projects they kind of go hand in hand on completion. As East Valley Sanchez Road comes closer and closer to being, shovel ready, or the shovels start digging, East Lebanon will also get to the same part. Other projects that are on there that are quite large, water infrastructure is one of our largest is our largest infrastructure system. So projects in nature do cost a lot for this enterprise fund. But there's the airport water project, which would bring water to that tank that was installed last year or the year before. I can't remember when they finished. But that would bring water to that, which would help with the water, getting water to the airport, and then water suppression in those hangars. Other ones on there, we talked about Hollywood Road in the streets. Now this is the water portion of Hollywood Road. And then new projects are the 8th Street tie-in, yard material storage, Spring Canyon improvements, 8th Avenue main renewal, the AC transmission renewal, and then pipe storage at the Mayak.
The Extension East Lebanon, Maine. I don't remember the location of that. It's Lebanon, I know.
I didn't want to be funny. I was going to say Lebanon, but it's south of town. Morgan's behind me.
I think I know where it is now, but I'm picturing it.
It's south of town.
I'm picturing it running north and south. Is why I'm losing the
Mesquite and Thorn.
yeah.
Mayor,
Mesquite,
Vice
Thorn,
Mayor
all
Lopez,
them.
this project is located on Lebanon, and then it's going to go east across the highway, go south to Cactus Road, and loop back into our system at the Cactus Road area.
We had a part to build there because that come under some grant monies too because it was colonialized.
Right, so Lebanon project will be 100% grant funded.
And so we're not taking a loan out on
No, but the project that they referred to as East Valley Sanchez is
Yeah,
also tied into that project. So there's some caveats about that when Lebanon can start. I'm going to be having a meeting with RD this week. That customer out in that area with the Lebanon wanted to discuss the construction. I'll be interested to see what they have to say about that project. But we do have a meeting over the phone to discuss Lebanon this week.
Are we gonna recoup our monies? What's coming out of our pocket?
0 for Lebanon.
That's what I was getting at. Zero's getting out of this project. Because it was colonialized, we weren't gonna do it unless we had some grant money. Okay.
Correct, and that's
0.
very understood, and it was very clear by council that Lebanon will be 100% grant funded.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Morgan. And some background on that too. That was a project where somebody in East Lebanon approached USDA for grant funding to get them into our water system. And so the only way it would happen is if it was grant funded.
So you said there was loan for that? Where does that come in?
There's a loan for the East Valley Sanchez Road project. There's grant funding for East Lebanon, Maine, and a portion of that grant is going to also be used for East Valley Sanchez. So they awarded a grant that was larger than the East Lebanon, Maine project that we are using on Sanchez as well. They approved us to use it on Sanchez as well. Sanchez is a quite large project that is going to require, there's 2 grants and then also a loan to fund that.
Now, the upgrade of Rowley and the Booster Building. So that's up the hill from 8th Street, going towards Golf Course Road in Thatcher.
Correct.
And I think I know where the Booster Building is, a white building, but that's quite a cost for, I don't understand why.
Yeah, so in this project, there's a section of line that's about a 1930, 1940 that goes diagonal straight as the crow flies. And at the time, it was desert. Well, now there's some homes and stuff throughout that area. So the reroute would be utilizing improved or modern material that's existing infrastructure in the ground. We'd be tying into that and reroute a lot of the transmission of that water. And then also the relocation of the Booster Building. Currently, right now, it's on Robson Ranch. We would be relocating that closer to Quail Ridge.
Yeah, there's a lot of building going on out there. Okay, thank you, sir.
Any more water questions? Next, we have wastewater and also the wastewater treatment plant. In wastewater, the one I would like to point out again, a lot of work is being done on Hollywood Road and each utility. As we looked at the CIP, we looked at Hollywood Road and how can we best use our resources, not going in, paving a road, and then going in and tearing off the road to put a water line in, or tearing it up to put electrical poles in, or having to widen it more. So all of these Hollywood Road projects are happening in conjunction with each other so that we can best utilize the resources that we have. Other than that, you'll see starting at 1602, those are the wastewater treatment plant projects. The yard security, drying bed, septic receiving, and those are not new projects. Those shouldn't have asterisks by them, but the drainage improvements, the SCADA hardware upgrade, and SCADA stands for something. I know it's in the page, but I don't know off the top of my head. Supervisory control and data acquisition.
Remote control.
Okay. The paint restoration and the automatic bar screen are all new projects for the wastewater treatment plant. Our wastewater treatment plant is run by a consulting company, Jacobs. And these are the projects that they feel need to be done within the next 5 years in order to maintain our wastewater treatment facility at the level that we want to.
Can I just throw in a point here? Vice Mayor Lopez, you pointed out, when can capital really affect operations? I think that septic receiving is a great project where we can cut back on our operational need to service RVs and septic tank dumpers by providing an automatic process where they can come in and do it themselves. So this cuts back on operations by just investing a little bit in capital. I just want to get that in there.
I thought they were closer to being done by now. They're trying to do something with it now. And I think the people there that have worked with us pretty good.
Thank you, Troy. I said I would point out one of those examples.
Hey, thank you, especially at the wastewater.
Yeah. Any more at wastewater or wastewater treatment plant? If not, we'll continue into natural gas. Here we have that gas meter upgrade grant project that we talked about earlier, that we were awarded the grant through FESMA. Who did award us the grant? Department of Transportation. It's a $1 million project. As we looked at the other project that had meter replacements, that is accurate in how much Troy said $1.5 million annually to replace meters. So this is a portion of that cost. Well, fortunately for gas, we did get grant funding. Some other ones that I want to highlight is that we have a new project in rectifier monitoring system. This is going to help us. This is an operational, a capital project that will improve operational efficiency for us. So this will give us better reads on our rectifiers.
On meter replacement, are we staying with the same brands? Is it going, or do we now have to have a new program to run the new ones we're putting in? Are they going to beat us up that way with their software?
So there's a federal procurement guidelines we have to follow when we're procuring these since they're on a grant. So we're looking at our options there to know what we can do. We currently have a system that reads off towers, so we don't have to manually go out and read the meters. We want to keep with that, but we have to specify that all in the bidding process that we go through for these meters. So Raymond and Gas is definitely working with our procurement people and talking about what our options are there. So we don't know right now. We're still trying to get the ins and outs of the grant.
So them being solid state meters, don't they give you any indication if they're failing or their condition?
Not that I'm aware of currently. The only thing we get is some sort of feed of letting us know how much the meter is changed from the previous month, but I don't believe there's any condition rating of how the meter's doing. I think that'd be a more advanced meter than what we typically buy.
You can tell if they've been tampered with.
We can check into that as we go through procurement. We'll look into those options.
Okay, let us, because I thought maybe you could tell if the percentage was falling down, if you're losing. A solid state, I didn't know if you could walk up to it and tell the health of it with a reading on a tool or from the office.
So this is where we're involving the gas department in our cyclical process. I talked about 1/10 of the city or 1/10 of our service area being broken down. It's not necessarily that they're going to replace every meter at every house. They're going to look to calibrate those. And I think that's at the point they get to see the health of the meter. It might not need to be physically replaced. It might just need to be recalibrated at that point. So having them part of our cyclical process to go through the city, they can start recalibrating all those meters and putting their hands on it and seeing if they really need to replace it or just recalibrate it.
I didn't know. I thought most of the solid state, they didn't recalibrate it. They just threw it away and put in a new one.
He did say newer technology is required in order to do that recalibration. Some of the stuff we have is pretty ancient that won't be able to be done. So
So we can't recalibrate.
but there is new meters that are out there that might meet that calibration standard. So it's been a hit or miss process in the past. We're just trying to get it more routine and cyclical.
Because if you told the health of the meters, you'd probably be able to know what neighborhood you needed to hit first.
We looked at all of our options when we broke down the service area and said, okay, where are the oldest meters at? And we've identified that the flats of Safford are probably our oldest area, but it would also include doing water across the northern part of the Gila River. So we're trying to make it a systematic approach, but yeah, we've tried to identify where the need is most.
Okay, 'cause seems like we always get captured in their software and their stuff, and then a year later, that one's out of business.
There's a lot to get to. We just have to take it one bite of the elephant at a time. So
It's an elephant. Okay, thank you, sir.
And then our last one tonight, I believe. Yes. Our last one tonight is electric. So in the electric's capital improvement plan, we have two new projects on top of the continuing capital maintenance projects that were presented last year. If you remember, or for some of you newer council members who weren't here last year, we were presented electric presented us a very comprehensive capital improvement plan that focused particularly on life cycle maintenance and replacing things over the life cycle of the CIP. And so to continue with that, we have two new projects, which also fall into that life cycle maintenance capital improvement category in coordination/ARC flash study, and then also the GCEC tie line. Any questions?
Got pole replacement, engineered pole upgrade. I don't see anywhere here where you're doing any study or evaluating the system to let us know what shape it's in, what different neighborhoods are in good health or need a little bit more, what the loads are in the different places to give us an overall heartbeat of the system.
So there is one study in there, that coordination arc flash study. I don't know. I'm not specialized in electric enough to know that, but there's somebody standing behind me who is going to give you a better answer.
I'm hoping.
So specific to the arc flash study is really around that, how it's currently set up, looking at the resistors that are in the system, ensuring that we have that arc flash capability throughout that system. So with the cyclical maintenance that we have in that budget now, it allows us to not only evaluate on an annual basis if something pops up, but it's a consistent money that allows us to upgrade those systems through smaller program sets internally, and allows our linemen to do that work internally instead of coming up with large CIP projects that then go out and we have a contractor do it for us.
Because you have neighborhoods that the health of, say, the hospital,
Mhm.
it being mainly solid state circuitry within a lot of their stuff. They want good, pure voltage delivered to them so that it doesn't mess with,
Yeah, it's required through some of their systems.
knock off their stuff. Same with the school. And so the neighborhoods, I haven't seen an individual study of all that in quite some time. Now, they may have it, they just haven't shared it with you.
Well, and
but-
we've gone through more of the historic older materials, when we did the solid copper replacement lines, that was part of that, trying to ensure that integrity throughout the system exists. What we have shown here in the arc flash study, and then around the GCEC tie-in is really about that system health, right? So as we sit down with you guys and we talk about those two specifically, the GCEC tie-in allows us to, instead of creating a new substation, to allow GCEC to support us if some requirement requires that we have a fire or something in our substation and there's an emergency, we have the ability to tie them in immediately to support us without the $50 million price tag that was associated with our current. So we're trying to systematically go through each of those systems and go into the neighborhoods where you got 4 or 5 houses with aged infrastructure in their backyard, and what's the best answer to correct that? And we do it in short, small increments instead of trying to take on half-mile or 2-mile sections all at one time.
It's a big thing I'm talking about. It's the health of the system as a whole. We have seen that quite some time. Arc study could be your fire retardant clothes. So I'm not quite sure what you're talking about for sure. But guess we'll find out.
Come down and we can have further discussions.
I would enjoy that.
With electric.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions on electric? So this probably was more fitting earlier on to talk about this, but I did want to talk about fund balance, reserves, and contingency as we talked about funding sources, and then we had the question come up about reserves, contingency, and fund balance. And I know that this question comes up almost every year throughout the year, not even just during the budget process, on what these are. And I kind of want to, in working with the city manager, we want to kind of nail down what the terminology is and how we use this so that we don't cause confusion going forward. I define these in what I feel is the best representation of them. So as we go and we talk about these things, I just want to make sure that when we talk about fund balance, that that represents the overall financial position of a city at the end of a fiscal year, including unspent revenues. So that's what is in, that includes any revenues that we dump into what would be our savings account. The reserves, those are the portion of the fund balance set aside for specific future needs, such as emergencies or capital projects. Council, when they pass the budget, we talk about using reserves on different things. The appropriation to use those reserves is the contingency. So it can kind of be confusing. So as we talk about contingency funds, those are the allocations within the annual budget to cover those unexpected costs. Reserves come in for the funding source. Contingency is saying, I have the authority to spend that funding source. Just like we have revenues and expenditures, those are how those are two related. The difference is fund balance is a broad measure of financial health, where reserves are designated savings. And then contingency funds are budgeted within a fiscal year funds unforeseen needs. Reserves serve as long-term financial cushions. And then if there's any other additional, anything else you want to say about that in your experience, that's how I felt that they should be explained. And as we go forward, when we use that terminology, I'm hoping that this will help when we say fund balance, reserve, or contingency. So if there is another question.
Just one, sorry. Since we're talking about this and we're going into a new budget season, I was here when the last budget started, but from then till now, we budgeted for all these things and the project started. We're not like getting updates of, how is the water department doing, or how is the electric department doing? Like, where are they in their budget? Have they stayed on track? Have they gone over? Are they under? So when can we expect to start seeing that? I mean, because some updates on that would be nice to know of, hey, we've budgeted for this and this project is on track and we're staying on budget, or how do we know where that's at? So we approve it, but there's no follow-up.
That is a good point, and I know that that's something that's been brought forward. And in working with the city manager, I know that him and I have talked about, and with Troy as well, presenting you guys with some sort of quarterly report on financial health and how the city, how our eyes the city is doing and how the funds are doing. Each department, what their spending levels are at based on what we budget. That is something that that is on our radar. That's something we're trying to work on. As we go through this budget process and as I work on developing, we already have a template in place that I'm working on. So my plan, and this might be expedited, but my plan is to present you guys with something at the end of the year saying, like, here's your end of the year, fourth quarter, and then going forward into next fiscal year, having a quarterly report that I produce for you guys that basically says, here's how the city is doing through the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and then just keep that as something that goes out as a report to you guys. And then obviously if there are any questions that council has that they want to address in a council meeting in front of the public from that report, they can bring that to a meeting after I send the report out. That's my plan. I know that we've talked about that. That's been something we've talked about for a while. I foresee that being expedited now, but that it is on our radar. So I do appreciate that is something that you would like to see, and that's something that we are working on.
And my second follow-up with that is we've all heard there's all kinds of cuts going on in the government right now. Are you guys closely monitoring that for this new upcoming budget? Because a lot of the fat is getting cut and they're slimming everything down. So are you guys monitoring that to make sure when we go into this budget that you're addressing that?
As we bring you a budget and as we go through the budget process, all of us closely monitor what's going on because there's a lot of unforeseen things that can happen, and we want to plan for that unforeseen. There are some things that we know could happen. There are some things that are still unknown, but we want to plan and be responsible. And if it's a possibility, we want to plan for that possibility because we don't want to be caught off guard. there will be an opportunity for council to see, and it will be based off of those possibilities. So as I bring forward, or as we, the city, brings forward department budgets, and as we bring forward revenue projections, I'll allude to some of those things in some of my projections, or in why certain things are the way they are in department budgets. Those will all, there'll be an explanation behind all of it. I don't want us to go into a fiscal year in a position where we aren't good financially.
Right.
And so we do understand those things, and we do consider those things when we create the budget. That is the end. If anybody has any other questions, if not, back to you, Mayor.
We'll go ahead and close the work session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was very good. And we'll reconvene into a regular meeting. And we'll close the regular meeting and reconvene into an executive session.
Mayor, I move that we convene in an executive session after a 5-minute break.
We have a motion and a second to reconvene into executive session after a 5-minute break. All in favor? Opposed? Carries. everybody go?
You wanted to stay and have fun with us.
Everybody here? Everybody here?
Just gonna eat.
Okay, now we'll close the executive session and reconvene into our regular meeting. Number 16, announcement of current events. None? Number 17, request for future agenda items.
Mayor, I considered one, but I might wait till next time to bring it up. I might visit with B about it first.
Okay. Yeah, I'd just like to make one comment. I'd like to compliment Lance and his, the workers, because they're by the Mount Graham Shopping Center, those islands, how they were overgrown, and I noticed them the other day, they were cleaned up and they looked nice.
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to go back one item on future or current events. Remind you guys that next weekend is Free Dump Weekend. Make sure your constituents know that. It's 20th, 21st, and 22nd. Next Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So didn't want to, but thank you for the compliments on 20th Avenue.
It looked good because I think when I saw it the first, before your work, the shopping center landscape looked nice and clean, neat, and I just noticed it, how it looks good.
Well, and our goal there is eventually get some more landscaping in there. That ground all got sterilized years ago, and we're waiting until those trees start to thrive a little better, and we'll try some other
Good.
landscaping.
Good job. Okay. Anything else?
Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion to adjourn and a second. All in favor? Opposed?